The halls of the Valerith Palace were cold and bright, every surface polished to mirror shine. Princess Solara walked its marble floors alone, her silvery cloak trailing behind like a silent promise. She passed guards who bowed and technicians, who offered her private transport. Each time, she shook her head. She would not travel on any Valerith ship. Rumors spread through court. They said she feared betrayal, that she mistrusted the whispering walls of her own home. But inside her heart, Princess carried a deeper wound, one born of loss and loneliness. When Solara was small, her mother had taken her on grand voyages across the star lanes. The sky outside the ship's viewport had seemed endless, filled with promise, yet on one mission, an engine fault stranded them far from any help. The court's private fleet had refused to send rescue for days. Young Solara lay shivering in her cabin, watching the stars fade as her mother fell ill. By the time Valerith ships arrived, hope had turned to grief. Solara's mother never returned home. The fleet that was meant to save them had abandoned them instead. From that day on, Princess Solara narrowed her trust. She learned every trick of Valerith engineering and every hidden protocol of court intrigue. She studied the records of every expedition, marking each one that had ended in disaster or delay. At her command, hundreds of ships sat idle in the palace docks, sleek vessels armed with pulsing energy cannons, gleaming with alien symbols. None of them would bear her name or her life. She refused her people's technology and their promises. Only human ships might earn her faith. News of humanity reached her through traders and diplomats. Humans were far from perfect. They fought wars, made mistakes, and lost ships. Yet tales spoke of their courage. Small crews crossing deadly nebulae, risking everything to help strangers. One story told of a human captain who saved an entire alien colony from a collapsed star. Another described a crew that shared its scarce water rations with refugees in the darkest void. These stories intrigued Solara. She wondered if humans could be more honest than her own kind. In the Grand Council chamber, the Emperor's envoy knelt before her. His voice trembled as he spoke of the latest human expedition docked on Valerith's space station, Helios 1. My princess. They said they claim no vessel in the Empire can carry you. They insist only their ship, the Aurora's Dawn, may bear your name. Solara watched his pale face. She saw their fear that she would choose humanity over her people. And in that moment, she felt her own heart tremble too. The envoy rose and bowed again. Before he turned away, Solara lifted her hand. Tell Captain Hansen, she said softly, that I will board the Aurora's Dawn. Her words echoed through the chamber. Courtiers gasped. Technicians froze at control panels. Outside, the rumble of distant engines slowed as if the entire station held its breath. The princess had spoken a choice no one expected, to trust strangers above her own people. That evening, Solara walked to the observation window. Through the glass, the blackness of space stretched endlessly, dotted with pinpoints of light. She thought of her mother's final voyage and the betrayal of her people's fleet. She thought of the human tales of crews risking all for compassion. A single star blink winked at her, as if urging her onward. In her chest, her heart beat not with fear, but with hope. Perhaps in a human ship, she could find forgiveness and a new kind of loyalty. And so the Princess of Valerith prepared to leave the only home she had ever known. She packed a simple cloak, a token from her mother, and a data crystal filled with her own designs for starship engines. In the quiet of her chambers, she whispered a vow to open her heart again, to trust where she once could not, and to discover whether humanity's promise of honor was real. Tomorrow, she would step aboard the Aurora's Dawn and begin a journey unlike any the galaxy had seen before. The docking bay of Helios 1 thrummed with activity as the human freighter Aurora's Dawn prepared to depart. Princess Solara stepped onto the gleaming metal floor, her silvery cloak pooling like liquid moonlight behind her. She paused, watching. As human engineers adjusted the ship's thrusters, their faces lit by the gentle glow of control panels. They moved as one team, voices calm and steady. Solara drew in a deep breath. In that moment, she felt the weight of her decision and the fragile hope it carried. Captain Mira Hansen stood on the gangway, arms folded, eyes curious beneath her short dark hair. When she saw Solara, she straightened and offered a small bow, polite but unbowed. No courtly flourish, no hidden agenda, just a direct and honest greeting. Solara likened it to sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She inclined her head and stepped forward. As her boots clicked along the ramp, she realized she was leaving behind centuries of mistrust for the promise of something new. Inside the ship, the crew gathered in the main corridor to welcome their passenger. Engineers, navigators, and medics formed a half circle, their expressions a mix of awe and respect. They had heard of Solara's refusal to trust her own people's vessels. Some whispered that she was mad, others that she was wise to seek a different path. When Solara entered, a hush fell. She lifted her chin, meeting each pair of human eyes with gentle confidence. The room brightened with a shared smile, and at once the distance between princess and common crew began to shrink. Young engineer named Rill unpacked a small toolkit by Solara's side. He offered her a simple spanner wrapped in soft cloth. "For safety checks," he said. His voice trembled with excitement and a hint of fear. Solara accepted the tool and felt the rough metal under her slender fingers. It was nothing like the carved ornate gadgets she knew. It was plain, honest, and useful. She turned it over and nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly. In that small gesture, she acknowledged their trust in her hand, theirs in humanity's strength. Captain Hansen led Solara to the bridge, where star charts and holographic displays danced in the air. Solara's violet eyes widened at the sight. She remembered the day her mother had shown her Valerith star charts, all perfect lines and neat projections. These were alive and shifting, showing real-time data of nearby suns and drifting asteroids. Mira showed her how to plot a safe route. Through a precarious nebula, Solara traced the path with her finger, sensing the human ingenuity behind every calculation. She felt a thrill of joy, a feeling she had not known since childhood. As the final preparations finished, the captain approached Solara once more. "When we leave," she said, "you will see more than stars. You will see what humans can be when we act with heart." Solara nodded, her silver hair catching the bridge lights. She remembered her mother's last words, that hope could light the darkest void. Here on a human ship, hope was more than a word. It was a living promise made real by every careful hand and honest smile. Moments later, the docking clamps released with a soft hiss. Aurora's Dawn rolled away from the station and glided into open space. Through the viewport, Valerith towers shone briefly before drifting into darkness. Solara felt her pulse quicken. She turned to the crew, gratitude shining in her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt she had a family beyond her empire's walls. And as the human freighter dove into the unknown, she embraced the journey ahead, ready to learn, to trust, and to discover a new kind of loyalty among the stars. Princess Solara stood on the bridge of the Aurora's Dawn as the stars streaked by in silver trails. She watched the human crew work with quiet intensity, their hands moving over panels and levers with practiced ease. Doubt flickered in her. Violet eyes? Could these imperfect beings really be different from her own people? She folded her arms and turned to the lead engineer, a tall woman named Kira, whose uniform bore a simple name tag and a small human flag patch. "Tell me," Solara said, her voice steady but cool, "what will you do if we encounter a Valerith blockade?" The question hung in the air. The crew exchanged glances, as if surprised by her direct challenge. Kira paused, then smiled gently. "We will try to negotiate first," she replied. "But if they fire, we will defend this ship and its passenger." Solara studied Kira's face. There was no arrogance there, only honest resolve. Her chest tightened as she felt a spark of trust spark within her. Later, in the engineering compartment, Solara invited herself to examine the ship's core. She ran her fingers along the cold metal of a human-designed power conduit. The Valerith. Ones she had known were sleek and incomprehensible, built to hide every wire and fuse. This one was open, almost humble, with warning labels and clear human script. She asked the engineers to explain each part. They answered patiently, even offering to let her calibrate a secondary valve herself. Solara inhaled and exhaled, her barrier softening as she realized they did not treat her as an untouchable princess, but as part of their team. At mealtime, in the communal mess hall, Solara sat with the crew instead of alone in her private cabin. She watched as humans passed trays of steaming food, simple bread, roasted vegetables, and a stew that smelled of distant forests. A young navigator, Jonah, offered her a ladle of stew. "It's our favorite recipe," he said. "My grandmother taught me." Solara tasted it and found herself smiling at the warmth in every spoonful. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the comforting kindness of strangers. That night, as the Aurora's dawn glided through a calm sector of space, Solara climbed to the observation deck. The glass dome above showed 1,000,000,000 cold suns, but she no longer felt alone. Captain Mira joined her, handing her a cup of hot tea. "Do you ever doubt your choice?" Mira asked softly. Solara wrapped her hands around the cup, feeling its warmth seep into her fingers. She thought of her mother, lost to her when the Velarith fleet abandoned their ship, and of the human engineers who had saved her mother's people in so many stories. For a moment, Solara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "Wondered if I was betraying my own kind." She looked at the stars, her reflection mingling with their light. "But this crew, they have shown me a different way. A way built on honesty and compassion." Myra nodded and neither spoke again. In the silence, Solara felt the last sliver of her fear dissolve into hope. The next day, the Aurora's dawn encountered its first real danger. A drifting minefield left from an ancient war. Sensors blinked red, warning of hidden mines. The Velarith response would have been to fire a powerful pulse to detonate them all, regardless of nearby ships. Solara waited, breath held, to see what the humans would do. The crew worked quickly, using small drones to map safe paths and deactivate mines one by one. Solara watched, pulse racing, as they guided each drone through the deadly field. Their careful methods saved precious time and prevented collateral damage to nearby merchant ships. When the last mine was deactivated, applause echoed through the bridge. Solara stood and joined in, her heart light. She saw in their brave work a promise that trust was not a weakness, but a strength to be protected. In that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. The princess who once refused every Velarith ship had found a new kind of family among humans. And as the Aurora's dawn charted a safe course onward, Solara finally let her guard down and allowed herself to believe in the honor of Earth's people. Princess Solara found herself drawn to the empty observation deck later that evening. The glass dome arched overhead, revealing the silent sweep of endless stars. Each one felt like a distant promise, a light shining through the darkness. She wrapped her arms around herself and gazed upward, remembering nights with her mother, when the universe had seemed full of hope. Now, alone aboard the Aurora's dawn, she felt both grief and possibility mingling in her chest. Captain Mira Hansen arrived without announcement, carrying 2 steaming cups of spiced tea. The warm aroma drifted between them as she set a cup in Solara's hands. Solara accepted it with a soft smile, finding comfort in the simple gesture. They stood side by side in silence, watching distant constellations slide past. The hum of the ship's engines was a low lullaby, more soothing than any grand Velarith choir. After a long moment, Mira broke the quiet. "You look like you carry a heavy burden," she said gently. Her voice was calm, yet full of genuine concern. Solara stared at the tea's swirling steam inside. "I do," she admitted. "For years I have felt the weight of betrayal and loss. I thought I could protect myself by trusting no one. But being here, with you and your crew, I do not know how to let go of old fears." Mira nodded and leaned against the railing. "Letting go can be the hardest part of healing," she said softly. "But you do not have to face it alone." Solara turned to look at her, violet eyes reflecting starlight. She saw no judgment there, only kindness. In that moment, Solara felt her walls crack. She shared the story of her mother's final voyage, how the Velarith rescue fleet had ignored their distress beacon, and how her mother had died waiting for help that never came. Tears slipped down Solara's cheeks as she spoke, but Myra did not look away. When Solara finished, Mira reached out and gently clasped her hand. "I'm sorry you lost her," Mira said. "No one should face that kind of betrayal or pain alone." Solara leaned into the touch, feeling warmth spread through her. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt understood. Realized that although her past was shaped by mistrust, her future could be written in trust instead. They talked late into the night. Solara asked Myra about Earth's history, about how sometimes humans had failed each other, yet had found ways to forgive and rebuild. Mira spoke of people who had risked everything to help strangers, of movements that had begun with one small act of courage. Solara listened, absorbing every word. The stories wove together grief and resilience, reflecting her own journey. At one point, Solara whispered, "I never thought I could open my heart again." She looked up at the stars, her voice trembling. "But here, I feel the first stirrings of hope." Mira smiled and squeezed her hand. "Hope grows when we plan it together," she said. "We can face the unknown as a team, just as your mother hoped we might." As the hours passed, the Aurora's dawn drifted through a quiet sector of space. Below them, the crew worked in shifts, unaware of the deep conversation unfolding above. Solara sipped her tea, thinking of each crew member he'd met, the earnest engineer, the brave navigator, the cheerful medic. They had welcomed her without ceremony, treated her as one of their own. Their openness had taught her a new kind of strength. Before they left the observation deck, Mira stood and offered her arm. Solara took it, and they walked side by side toward the passage back to the bridge. Solara felt lighter, as if a shadow had lifted from her shoulders. She had shared her pain and found someone willing to bear it with her. It was a lesson she would carry forward, that trust, once given and honored, could heal even the deepest wounds. That night, Solara returned to her cabin and placed her hands upon the data crystal containing her ship designs. She thought of her mother's brilliant mind and how it deserved to fly free. With renewed resolve, she whispered a vow to build bridges, not walls. Tomorrow, she would stand among the crew with more courage than ever before, ready to embrace the journey ahead. In the soft glow of her cabin, under the silent watch of distant suns, the princess took her first true breath of hope. A sudden pulse of bright light flooded the Aurora's dawn, waking Princess Solara from a light sleep. She rubbed her eyes as alarms blared through the corridors. Through her cabin viewport, she could see the ship's lights flicker and dim. She knew at once that a solar flare had struck them, and the ship was in danger. Solara hurried onto the corridor and joined a crowd of crew members racing toward the engineering compartment. The air smelled of hot metal and burnt circuits. Engineers, in gray uniforms, crouched beside sparking panels, struggling to reroute power. Solara's heart pounded. She felt a surge of fear for the ship, for the crew, and for herself as a passenger in their care. Captain Mira Hansen met Solara at the compartment door. Sweat beaded on Mira's forehead as she barked orders. "Need to stabilize the core." "Before we lose all life support," Mira said, voice firm despite the tension. Solara watched the captain's steady gaze and felt a spark of calm. Mira's courage gave her courage to Dot. An engineer shouted that the secondary reactor had shut down. Machines groaned as the ship's hum dropped. Lights faded further, leaving only emergency strobes. Solara remembered her studies of Velarith engineering and her mother's teachings about energy fields. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "I can help with the field matrix," she said. The engineers glanced at her, surprise in their eyes. Mira hesitated, then nodded. "Do what you can, princess." Solara approached the main console and laid her hands on the cool surface. The human engineers explained the layout of the reactor's energy conduits, pointing to valves and power nodes. Solara listened, her mind racing as she translated their simple diagrams into the complex patterns she knew from Velarith designs. She located the subfield regulator valve that linked the core to the auxiliary power grid with careful fingers. She adjusted the pressure settings, opening the valve just enough to release stored energy. Sparks flew as power surged back into the ship's systems. The lights brightened slightly, and the hum of the engines grew stronger. A cheer rose from the crew. Solara felt relief wash over her, mixed with pride. She had helped, but she had also used her knowledge to save them. Engineers slapped her shoulder and thanked her. She met their eyes and saw genuine gratitude. In that moment, she knew she was part of something greater than royal titles or ancient prejudices. She was part of a team. The reactor compartment filled. With light, the strobe warnings turned off, replaced by steady green indicators. Captain Mira checked her console and exhaled. "Stable for now," she announced. Relief spread through the crew like gentle warmth. Solara felt tears prick at her eyes, not from fear now, but from joy. Together, they had faced disaster and won. Later, Solara walked through the ship's lower decks to check on the med bay. The ship's doctor, Anna, was treating a few crew members who had bruises and minor shocks from the flare's sudden jolt. Lara offered water and comfort too, each of them. Their smiles and nods told her she belonged here, not just as a princess, but as a friend and a helper. When Solara returned to the bridge, Captain Mira was waiting. The stars outside shone as brilliantly as ever, untouched by the flare's chaos. Mira offered Solara a seat beside her. "You did well today," she said simply. Solara nodded, feeling her heart swell. She had come aboard as a stranger, but now she stood as a savior of the ship she had chosen. That night, back in her cabin, Solara sat at her desk and wrote a message to her people. She described the human crew's bravery, their teamwork, and their willingness to trust her knowledge. She promised that the Valerith Empire would one day learn from humanity's strength and compassion. As she sealed the data crystal, she felt hope rise within her chest. Solara placed the crystal beside the token from her mother. She whispered a quiet thanks to both her mother's spirit and the human crew who had welcomed her. In the soft glow of the cabin, the princess felt a sense of peace and purpose she had not known since childhood. She closed her eyes and slept, ready for whatever journey tomorrow would bring. That morning, Princess Solara awoke to the gentle hum of Aurora's dawn. She dressed in simple human clothes. Plain tunic and trousers felt a strange thrill of freedom. No ceremonial robes, no weight of gold. She smelled the faint hint of engine oil and fresh air recycled through the life support. Felt like home. In the mess hall, the crew greeted her with warm smiles and offers of breakfast. Solara chose a bowl of fresh fruit and porridge, sitting with Ril and Jonah. They talked about the next leg of their journey, to neutral station where the Valerith envoy would meet her. Solara's heart tightened at the thought of facing her own people again. After breakfast, she went to the conference room. The captain and crew waited around the long table. A hologram of the neutral station spun in midair, showing docking bays and diplomatic chambers. Solara inhaled. This meeting could decide her fate and the future of two empires. When the Valerith envoy's ship docked, Solara stood by the airlock with Captain Hansen. Through the viewport, she saw her former court's sleek vessel gleaming like a polished dagger. Solara's pulse quickened, but Mira squeezed her hand. "We stand with you," Mira said, and Solara drew strength from those words. On the docking platform, the Valerith envoy bowed deeply. He spoke with cool formality, urging Solara to return home and abandon this human experiment. His voice held concern for her safety and loyalty. Solara felt the old guilt betrayal of her blood and birthright. She clutched the hilt of the data crystal in her pocket. Instead of silence, the door behind her slid open. The entire human crew filed in. Engineers, navigators, medic sols stood behind Solara, unarmed and respectful. The envoy's eyes widened. Ril stepped forward and said, "Princess Solara chose our ship because she believed in us. We trust her, and we will protect her choice." A murmur ran through the Valerith suits assembled officers. The envoy hesitated, then recovered. He offered Solara the station's formal quarters and safe passage. "Your place is with your people," he declared. But Solara raised her hand. "I honor my heritage," she said, voice clear, but I have found a family here. Oh. She turned to Mira. I choose to stay on the Aurora's dawn. The words rang with conviction. The Valerith envoy bowed his head, uncertain whether to show anger or respect. Captain Hansen stepped forward and added, "We welcome her as one of us." The envoy's pride bristled, but he saw the united faces of humans determined to stand by Solara. Slowly he inclined his head. "Then you travel as a delegation of both peoples," he said. "May our worlds learn from each other." As the envoy departed, Solara exhaled and felt relief flood her chest. She looked at the ridge of human smiles. Tears of joy pricked her eyes. Here stood the beings who had shown her compassion and courage. She realized that loyalty was not demanded but chosen and earned. That afternoon, Solara walked the corridors of Aurora's dawn with Captain Mira. They talked of what lay ahead, scientific exchanges, joint missions, and new alliances. Felt excitement and purpose bubbling inside her. She would be an ambassador of hope, bridging to civilizations. Before she retired to her cabin, Solara paused at the observation deck. The stars spun quietly overhead. She whispered to her mother's token and to the human crew who had become her family, "Thank you for teaching me trust." In the silent glow of distant suns, Princess Solara felt her heart finally at peace. Princess Solara woke before dawn, the soft glow of distant stars through her viewport guiding her from sleep. She dressed in the simple tunic of Aurora's dawn's crew, feeling its fabric warm with kindness. Today would mark the start of a new era. On the bridge, Captain Mira greeted her with a proud smile. The crew prepared to depart the neutral station and head toward Valerith space. Solara felt her heart swell with anticipation. She looked at the humans she had come to love and trusted as the engines hummed. Solara stepped to the observation deck one last time before leaving station orbit. She pressed her hand to the glass, studying the pinpricks of light that would soon be out of sight. Each star reminded her of hope. In the mess hall, the crew gathered for a final meal aboard the station. Solara sat at the head of the table, not as princess or alien, but as friend and comrade. They passed bowls of stew and bread, laughter echoing under the bright lights. Rill raised a toast. "To Princess Solara," he said, voice full of admiration. "May your trust in us be the spark that lights both our worlds." Solara stood, tears shining in her eyes, and bowed her head in gratitude. Captain Mira spoke quietly. "You have changed us all, Solara. You showed us what it means to forgive, to trust beyond fear." Solara touched Mira's hand. "You changed me more than I ever dreamed," she replied softly. The Aurora's dawn undocked and slid into space, leaving the station behind. Solara watched its corridors shrink, then disappear. She felt a pang of sadness mixed with joy. She knew her path lay forward, not back. Weeks passed as they traveled homeward. Solara joined the crew on late-night shifts in engineering, helping to refine human systems with her Valerith knowledge. The engineers learned new ways to improve reactors. And Solara saw how sharing wisdom could build stronger bonds. In the navigation room, she worked alongside Jonah to chart safe routes through disputed sectors. Their partnership grew into friendship. Solara laughed at Jonah's jokes and felt her loneliness finally fade. One evening, the ship's comm system crackled with a message. The Valerith Emperor himself invited Solara back to the capital as ambassador of the new alliance. Heart raced. She stood before the crew and read the message aloud. They cheered and clapped. The day they entered Valerith space, Solara wore her silver cloak once more. It felt lighter now, woven with the threads of human trust. She stepped onto the gangway with Captain Mira at her side and the crew behind them. At the Imperial Palace, Solara faced a crowd of dignitaries.
Wow.
She took a steady breath and addressed them in her clear voice. She spoke of the humans' courage, honesty, and warmth. She told of their shared victories and how trust could heal old wounds. The Emperor listened, his stern face softening. When Solara finished, he rose and bowed deeply. "You have shown us a new way," he said. Velarith and humans will walk this path together. Erupted in applause. Later, private tears of relief and happiness fell from Solara's cheeks. She realized her journey was complete. She had found trust and given it freely. She had built a bridge between worlds. That night, Solara returned to her chambers and opened the data crystal she had carried throughout her voyage. It glowed with designs and records of human Valerith cooperation. She placed it on her desk. As a symbol of unity, in her final moments before sleep, she touched her mother's token and whispered, "We did it, Mother. We found hope among strangers, and we built a better future." The distant stars shone bright, and Princess Solara closed her eyes, her heart full of peace and promise.